attempt through North Africa to take root in their country, and they're keying on the media to make sure that that doesn't happen. Demonstrations planned in 23 cities on the mainland and in Taiwan to kick off China's own Jasmine Revolution have been marked by sparse turnouts and instant clampdowns on journalists. Foreign reporters claim they were harassed. Some said they were beaten. And a BBC News crew said it was bundled into a police van and forcibly removed from a demo. Local media were also targeted and probably face more serious consequences. As many as 100 Chinese bloggers and web activists were detained or preemptively put under house arrest prior to the protests. One of them, Ran Yunfei, a magazine writer and signatory of Charter 08, a manifesto that calls for political reform in the country, has reportedly been charged with subversion of state power for distributing information about the protests online. Journalists in Iraq are still paying the price for trying to report the news. They're calling February 25th a black day for media freedom in the country. A series of protests that Iraqis described as a day of rage descended into violence with 29 reported fatalities. There was also a catalog of attacks on journalists. Police raided a TV station, AlJazeera, which was filming the Baghdad demo from its own roof. 10 people were arrested there. A journalist was reportedly run over by a police car, and Muntazar al-Zaidi, the reporter famous for throwing his shoes at former U.S. President George Bush, was reportedly arrested as well. Media workers in Iraq have long accused Prime Minister al-Maliki of tolerating a climate of intimidation against journalists. They've announced that in response they will refuse to cover al-Maliki, but it's hard to foresee them sticking to their guns on that. He is the Prime Minister, after all. 8 newspapers in the West African country of Ivory Coast have ceased publication because of what they call constant harassment from supporters of the disputed president. All of the newspapers involved are seen as pro-Alassane Ouattara papers. He was widely considered to have won the presidential elections in November last year. Ouattara says he beat the incumbent, Laurent Gbagbo, who refuses to relinquish power. In a joint statement, the owners of the papers denounced the, quote, imperious and serious threat that hangs over the private and independent press, which refuses to go along with the illegal acts of Laurent Gbagbo's government, unquote. The papers, which say they will remain closed until further notice, also slammed what they call persistent judicial and police harassment of their staff. They're saying that their journalists are in constant danger and face threats of all different kinds. The Ivorian media have been described as partisan and outspoken during the recent unrest, and many analysts fear that their coverage could drive the country into another civil war. In just over a month, Nigerians will go to the polls to elect a new president. The country's media have been trying to cover the campaign, but it's not easy. Last year, out of the 175 countries that the media watchdog group Reporters Without Borders listed in its Press Freedom Index, Nigeria was ranked number 145. That's down 10 places from the year before. One website that's managing to report and make news in Nigeria is called Sahara Reporters, which made its online debut in 2006. It's become a media force in Nigeria, largely because it's not in Nigeria. The site's editor, Omoyele Sowore, is based in New York City, beyond the reach of the politicians and the corporations that his site often reports on. And most of his contributors aren't trained journalists. They're everyday Nigerians who photograph, video, and blog for Sahara Reporters. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on a website that isn't everyone's journalistic cup of tea, but is shaking up the Nigerian news space nonetheless.
From his office in Manhattan, New York, Omoyele Sowore, the editor of Sahara Reporters, is whipping up a media froth 8,000 kilometers away in Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, Sahara Reporters is a very popular media outlet here in Nigeria, and I guess what appeals to people is the nature of the stories they report.
Eyewitness accounts, just raw information about sensitive issues that the press in Nigeria is too afraid to publish or report.
Stories like the huge ExxonMobil oil spill in the Niger Delta last year, touchy tribal politics in Nigeria's various states. But the story that put Sahara Reporters on the news map in Nigeria had to do with the president, Umar Musa Yar'Adua.
Thousands of protesters took to the streets of the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, to condemn the absence of Mr. President.
Late in 2009, the president was sick and out of the country. The government kept the details under wraps, and reporting by Nigerian media was thin on facts.
Most senators expressed their anger over the lack of credible information on the health status of the #1 citizen.
Sahara reporters got the story, reporting where the president was, what the health issue was, and kept a running count of his days out of the country. It's the kind of journalism Nigerian media do not typically provide.
Most of what Nigerians get their news from, I mean the newspapers, the TV stations, have been completely taken over by the money bags. So that has diluted the media as we know it.
It's a media market that is dominated by politicians and influential businessmen, and it limits investigative reporting, and it leads to sometimes unethical journalism or unethical practices. But this is not unique to Nigeria. It happens all across Africa.
Can we get an email, or you can send me a text, you know?
Which is why Showore's decision to base himself out of New York is a smart one. Last year alone, Reporters Without Borders recorded 40 incidents of press violations in Nigeria. 3 journalists were killed, 7 were kidnapped in South Nigeria, and others faced death threats. An office in Manhattan puts Showore at a safe distance.
Sahara Reporters, run from New York, allows this website to be free and independent of persecution and harassment. In the past, we have documented cases where Nigerian security have arrested individuals that were suspected of being affiliated with his websites. This is a website that is a target, a prime target for the Nigerian government.
Because Sahara Reporters has been based on the web and overseas, there hasn't been that fear of reporting what they believe to be true. And I think that that's what Nigerians have really respected and embraced about Sahara Reporters, and that's why it continues to grow in popularity.
Sahara Reporters, mostly I browse it on the net, and I find it very interesting. They give quality information.
Sahara Reporters have really gone a long way to expose some of the ills of society that have been kept under the carpet by the Nigerian mainstream media.
The website's popularity isn't just with Nigerian readers. A lot of the traffic to the site comes from people wanting to contribute. Showore employs no formal staff. His website's tagline is "Report yourself," and he means it.
There are people who are saying to themselves, you know, we used to consume news, but we can actually produce news ourselves. We are doing the part of media or news reporting that is too important to be left to journalists or professionals.
It really has changed the face of online journalism with respect to the Nigerian audience. Nigerians love information. They are news junkies, at least most of them are. And Sahara Reporters has given them a forum where they can express themselves.
But while crowdsourced reporting can be powerful, and as Tunisia and Egypt proved, revolutionary, it also has drawbacks.
One of